You're listening to KTAL LP 101.5, Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Good morning and welcome to Take on Faith. I am your host, Reverend Kalani Kachela, or XK. Each week we'll explore matters of faith, spirituality, and current issues affecting our experience of the human condition. We'll have a thought-provoking guest on each episode. Thank you for joining me. Let's jump right on in. Celine O'Donovan is a native of Galway, Ireland. Following a successful international career in marketing, she authored the book Gifts from the Devastation. Her writing career was accelerated by personal lessons Celine learned after her diagnosis with breast cancer and its aftermath. Her message: nothing happens by chance, and all life's events are sent to spur spiritual growth and enable us to fulfill our individual gifts. Her mission is to create personal and practical epiphany moments that allow her readers to discover this for themselves. She is also the author of a novel, The Tapestry of Life, and she joins us from Galway, Ireland. Celine O'Donovan, welcome to Take on Faith.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Delighted to be here.
And first off, I want to congratulate you on the book and just ask, how is the book being received?
Very good. I just launched the book about 2 weeks ago on the west coast of Ireland, and I know you said you visited Ireland, so I launched it in a beautiful location in Doolin near the cliffs of Moher. So for any Americans who have travelled to Ireland, they likely have visited at some point the cliffs of Moher, some people call it, but it's a beautiful, stunning location on the west coast of Ireland, and I launched it at a retreat for creatives, I suppose, writers, artists, musicians coming together. And so I launched it there, and I got very good feedback and a lot of interest since then, and I'm doing a lot of interviews. So it's early days, so I feel very good about how it's been received so far, and that it's resonating with people. That was the most important thing for me.
Excellent. Yeah, I have been to the Cliffs of Moher too. It's a beautiful place, one of the most beautiful places in the world, I might say.
Mm.
Yes. How are you holding up during this turbulent era of our global pandemic and this over a month-long war in Ukraine? Here in the U.S., we're having a lot of inflation, and then there's a lot of grief that pervades our world community.
I imagine, like everyone else, I'm having ups and downs. You know, I have days where I'm very optimistic and hopeful and strong and all about focusing on creating the new and the type of world we want to live in. The other days, I feel the grief. I think what has helped me enormously is the grief I went through leading up to cancer and having cancer. And I have seen so many parallels about it's a very different story that's playing out, but the collective grief and my own personal grief, and how I best, I suppose, process this is, as I had to see the trauma and the grief and the shadow and the darkness in my own life, I believe we have to see it collectively in the world, and it is important. We have to see it. It's horrendous to see some of the things that are going on, but it is the only way I think we heal. We release it, we move on from it, we create a better world from it, we transform. So I feel that very strongly. So I'm quite strong in that. I feel I have a focus always, as much as I can, on how we create the new. I don't believe in giving my energy to, I believe a lot of systems are collapsing in the world, and I think they have to. I believe they have to. So my biggest, and the title of my book, Gifts from the Devastation, I think is very relevant to the collective devastation in the world right now. And my hope and my intention is to support others who may be going through their own personal devastation, but also experiencing the stress and the breakdown of what's happening in the world. So, Yeah, it's not easy, but I am very optimistic about the future. I really am.
Talk for a moment about your spiritual or religious upbringing in your family of origin, or what we sometimes call the nuclear family.
Yes, okay. Well, I come from a family of three children. I'm the middle child, elder sister, younger brother. I grew up, like many people in Ireland, as a Catholic. I was raised Catholic in the Catholic faith. Um, and I think I always had a very, now I'm looking back, I can see that I always had, I think, a very strong spiritual connection as a child, even though I probably didn't fully understand what was happening. I was always very drawn to the non-physical or the metaphysical, or however you want to describe it. So I actually enjoyed, I have no, let's say, often people have different experiences from their religious upbringing. I found it a very necessary and important, an important part of my life. But what I do see now, and I think what is missing from particularly the Catholic faith, is this idea that God is outside of you, and that God is a sort of a fearful looking down on us, and we're sinners and we have to live in fear. I That's not my experience. I have, since my illness, connected with God, and it's in God inside of me. That's how I describe it, and I feel it. I feel that connection to my Creator all the time, every single moment of every single day, and it's carried me through everything that I have experienced since. So I suppose my religious upbringing, I am very grateful for it, because it introduced me to that understanding that there is something greater than all of us,
Mm-hmm.
and we have this higher aspect to us. But it has evolved for me, and I'm very glad that I have developed a very personal and intimate and deep connection with my Creator in my life that, yeah, has transformed my life and me.
That sounds a little different than
Yeah.
what many Catholics or Protestants even will say in terms of their understanding of God. Do I hear you making a distinction between what you learned early and how you
Yes,
experience religion now or spirituality now?
yes, very different. I feel it's very different. For me, I often used to think that when I was younger. I didn't really understand, why do I need to go? I have no issue with, priests or religious people at all, but there was an aspect of me who felt I need this connection directly. I often wondered, why do I always need to go? I think the idea of spiritual teachers and guides are very important in our life, and I look to so many people like that who have helped and guided me on my path. But I suppose the experience in the Catholic faith here in Ireland was often a very, you know, fearful sort of, the basic premise really was that you're a sinner, and you have to sort of redeem yourself. And I could see a lot of fear with people. I think the unfortunate thing that has happened in Ireland since has a lot of young people turned away from faith.
Mm-hmm.
And for a country that was extremely religious, but I think it had such a grip. If you interview many Irish people, or I don't know, I'm sure from other countries, and maybe it's a process we have to go through. We have to find a new way. And I think there's going to be a new form of spirituality. I feel it in Ireland, and I'm connecting with a lot of people who are very spiritual, but they may not be in the traditional sense of the church. But I think we're going to create something new and better. And we need our young people back and involved in this, because I think many of them are very disillusioned and very lost. Because, when I found I was very lost when I lost that connection in my life. And I believe it's very important.
Yeah, I had a professor when I was in seminary who
Mhm.
was from Ireland who taught theology, and he said that in the late 20th century, the church in Ireland tried to welcome in this period of openness where they invited people to just join the church, but wide open doors. But what they didn't anticipate is
Mm-hmm.
what you said, is that people often left the church too. So there was a two-way street. People,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted people to come in, but people were also going out because of that openness. And
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
you write about having a sense of vocation early in your life. What happened to you that gave you that desire for a life that meant something?
It's a difficult one to describe. I always felt from a very young age that there was some calling on my life, and I struggled to find it for many years. I think that's what ultimately led me to cancer. Ultimately, um, I had so many experiences throughout my life where I thought this cannot be it. I found the sort of material consumerist type lifestyle just so empty and just not at all fulfilling. And I felt there was something, I always felt a connection to something greater. And I just felt there is I have to have some deeper purpose in life. I just knew it. But I struggled to find it. But I found it now. But yeah, yeah.
Well, you're right that you graduated from the university and you were one of two people who got a job at a big bank. You were in a marketing career and you met your best friend there and you met your husband there, ex-husband now, and
Hmm.
you had a job that was afforded you travel around the world. And
Hmm.
I would say that you had a life that many people considered charmed.
Yeah.
Yet you
And it
described
was.
yet
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
described feeling worn down and being kind of empty over the materiality. How did you work through that? I know it was a lot of stress for you trying to figure that out. What was your process for working through it before the cancer came?
Okay. Well, I don't know that I had fully worked through it before it came. It was a long, drawn out process because I would say, yes, I did have a charmed life. I think we all can look at others and materially and say, oh, they look to have a charmed life, but nobody knows what's going on inside any of us at any given time, ever. Um, I did. I started out in a wonderful career, wonderful friend, wonderful husband. Um, and it was wonderful for many years, and then my marriage broke down. That was a very traumatic experience for me. I was I was 30, so that was a very big trauma at that time that really I struggled to make sense of life after that for many years. I couldn't understand how, having connected with someone I felt who was my soulmate, that it all just fell apart. And there was a very particular reason for it. I don't talk about it in this book because I think it's almost another book, but my husband was gay. So that was
Oh,
a hugely traumatic thing. Yeah, yeah. We're great friends now. We've reconnected. We're soulmates. I describe that. He describes that. We have a love that's beyond any of the romantic love. But at the time, because we had connected so deeply, it was hugely traumatic for me. That sent me on a spiral downwards, I think, for many years. I struggled to make sense of life. Why did it happen to me? I had huge emotional pain, didn't really know how to process it. I struggled with that. And as much as people want to be there for you, it is often very difficult for other people to hold your trauma because if they're not on very solid ground themselves, it can bring up their emotional pain. So it's not that I have any criticism of anyone. It's just, and particularly in Ireland at the time, there wasn't a lot of talk about going to therapy or, you just shoved everything down and got on with life. And that became my way of surviving, really, I would say. So I had that career in the bank. I left it. I lived in Greece for a year. I taught English over there. That was sort of a bit of an escape. I came back to Galway. I got a job in the local university. I worked with teenagers. That really was a saving grace for me. I found a new sense of purpose there. I loved working with young people and I loved supporting them, going to university. But again, after a number of years, so this is between the period of 2002, my marriage broke down, back in Galway in 2005, and I'm diagnosed 10 years later. So there was a process. I had a great number of years as well as working in the bank, in the university. But still, there was something, I just felt I didn't fit in this world. It's a very hard way to describe this. There was something not fulfilling me at a very deep level. I became quite frustrated with the way we were educating young people and the stress and pressure to get to university and the competition and the stress it was causing in them. I found that very difficult. Um, there was just many things. I had some unhealthy relationships in my life, and I just remember driving to work one day going, there has to be more to my life than this. I felt I was on a treadmill, And I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to that. We all have ended up often in a very fast-paced world where we're just doing. I just felt, this is it. Is this what I'm doing? I'm just doing like on a production line on a treadmill till I die. And I just knew, so I had many warning signs before cancer. And I'm always very conscious of talking to people about that if they start to feel that in their own life. I had a serious car accident a year before my diagnosis that filled me with, I would say basically that was a little bit of a mini breakdown. I used work as a way to escape my own pain and lack of fulfillment. So I overworked. It was probably a sort of became nearly addiction to work. So I was burning out from that and not addressing the core problem, which was, there was a lot of emotional pain I was still carrying, and I didn't feel a sense of purpose. I didn't feel I was making a difference in the world anymore. I used to believe I was, but I didn't feel I was. So all of those things combined, I suffered from anxiety, I had addictions, I had depression, series of things throughout and they were all just my way of coping. They were the only coping skills I knew at the time. So I understand that when I see it in someone else. And then ultimately the big wake-up call came when I wasn't able to change my life, which was cancer.
Well, tell us about your experience of learning you had breast cancer. What was that like? I know you had gone to see a reader, a person who had advertised online that you saw on your phone in 2016 named Carmel Conway. And you went to see her, and she gave you a warning. And then a few years after that, 4 years after that, you had the breast cancer diagnosis. What was that experience like for you, learning that you had breast cancer?
Okay. Well, I met her. It was funny. I met her just a month before I had cancer, before I was diagnosed. But I met her again 4 years later after the cancer. So I had a reading with her. I had always been interested in, as I said, the sort of non-physical, the spiritual world, even from a young person. So I often went for readings and things like that. But I was in desperation. I was sitting at work one day and I reached out when I saw the ad. So she really gave me a sense of hope, because although I believe she knew I had cancer, she didn't tell me that. She just said she saw something. She didn't tell me it was cancer. She did tell me that, I was going to go through serious change in my life, but, in the next few years, my life was going to transform and I would be, in a better place. So that was very helpful for me when 2 weeks later I got the diagnosis. And what happened was I was just sitting up in bed reading, and I just my arm brushed off what felt like a lump. I didn't do anything for a few weeks. I ignored it, as probably some people do. I didn't really want to go there. Cancer, as I said, was not in my family. But then eventually, after talking to a friend, and I was traveling with work, she said, look, you really should. It's probably nothing, but you should go to the doctor. And I did. And the doctor straight away referred me to what's called the breast check clinic here in Galway. Still, I had no sense that it was cancer. It was just a precaution. I went there, got all the tests, got a biopsy. And the minute they did the biopsy, I knew they don't do a biopsy if there isn't something serious going on. And I just felt the tears come. And I remember the nurse just holding my hand because she knew. And I was after that, and I thought I was going to leave, and they would call me back a week later. And I just wanted to run. I didn't want to know. And then the consultant called me into a room, and just within a minute, he said, we have to do the tests and get the results, but I can tell you from my experience, it is breast cancer, and you're going to need chemotherapy, surgery, radiotherapy. All I remember him saying is a year out of your life. And that was it. And it was like, I don't even know how to describe that other than something else. It was like I left my body, it was like some sort of autopilot took over. Any difficult news, I think anyone will say it's almost like out of survival. We nearly leave our body. It's just something takes over. But the interesting thing, and many people of your listeners may find this a strange response, but once I got over shock, which didn't take me too long, I felt relief. And not relief that I had cancer, obviously. I felt relief that I could stop. I felt that finally, for the first time in so many years, my life made sense. My life had not made sense. I suddenly, if you want to talk about that spiritual understanding, literally came in, because all of the way I was living in the burnout I was talking to you about, and the emptiness and this lack of purpose and the speed of life, I just couldn't really process or understand that I would be on earth just for that. And then I get a diagnosis of cancer, which is saying that isn't why you were here. This is why cancer has shown up. Because for me, cancer is not just an illness, a physical illness. It's mind, body, spirit. And I experience and understand it as a suppression of the human spirit. That's what was for me. I was suppressing myself throughout my life. And as a result, a cancer grew inside of me. So for the first time, it was like the cancer was the result of the way I had been living my life. It sort of was the manifestation of a life that was not working.
Let me stop you for a moment and reintroduce you.
Mm-hmm.
In case you're just joining us, you're listening to Take on Faith on KTAL 101.5 in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm Kalani Kachela, the host of the program. Today I'm visiting with Celine O'Donovan, who is an author from Galway, Ireland, and she has written a book, Gifts from the Devastation, about her journey following her breast cancer diagnosis. Now, you said that when you had the cancer, it gave you, I guess, answers to your purpose on life, and you could stop doing the things that you were doing. I think people would want to know, how did the cancer happen to bring all this to focus? Was it the cancer itself, the diagnosis of the cancer that kind of awakened you, or was it just the anticipation of the treatment, or maybe the possibility of death from cancer? Can you speak about that internal process?
Yeah. Sure. Probably a combination of all three. As I said, something in me felt just this, yes, I can finally stop. So I had been living a life of speed, and my mind was racing, my nervous system was I had adrenal fatigue. I had gone to a kinesiologist, a holistic health person who told me. So I knew all of these things. What happened, I'm only really, it's funny, as time goes on, it's funny, more and more understanding of it sort of comes to me. But what I can say is, once I started treatment, the physical impact of the treatment literally shut my body down. So I was living in my house on my own at the time. My body shut down. My mind was still racing. After probably a month or so, my mind started to slow down, because the chemotherapy and the drugs literally started it was like somebody powered down my body. It was like, we need to power you down. You're just gone into overdrive. And I couldn't find my way out of that. And in that period, the only way I can describe it is, I lived in my house on my own and everything went quiet. I connected with the most amazing sense of peace and calm and love and being looked after and being supported and guided. I don't know that I understood it at the time, but I just felt, I'm okay. I'll be okay. If death comes, death comes. If it doesn't, but something in me knew, no, this is like we're stopping you on your life path because you've gone off down the wrong road for a while. You've gone off in a cul-de-sac. We need to redirect you. So we're going to stop you. We're going to bring you back, and you have more to do. And that really has been my understanding since cancer. I'm back on my path, and I've never felt more on purpose and alive and guided and supported. But I would say, so it's a combination of all those things. I was ready to let go of my old life. I do think to let something greater, like a connection to God and your creator, if that is something that there is a calling in you for, there has to be space, and there was no space in my life. I was going so fast, my mind was racing. There was no space for anyone. There was no space for anything. So in that space, the only way I can describe, something else took over. I literally feel I was taken out of the car or the driving seat of my life, and the higher self took over and said, we're going to take over now for a little while and give you a rest, and then you can come back in when you're ready. And and I had 2 years, because literally it wasn't a year, it was 2 years. I had extreme fatigue following the treatment, and I understand that I needed that, because it wasn't enough for me to get like a break from my life for a week. I would have been back as the old Celine, which I was after the car accident. So I tried to go back to work and I couldn't. So something in me eventually just said, okay, I'm handing this over. I just felt it inside of me. I said, I hand it over to you, just show me the way. And ever since then, I would say to anyone who's afraid, or, I had my worries at times, but the minute you let go and you make a decision, okay, I want to be on my life path and I want to be guided, you will be shown every step of the way. I can say that 100%.
I'm wondering if that your body's shutting down and you're getting quiet and kind of getting in touch with yourself and your creator and your new sense of being in touch with God could be one of the gifts of the devastation. What do you say to that?
I would say it is the absolute number one gift from the devastation. Yeah, absolutely. That is the greatest gift. And I think it's the greatest gift from any devastation. I found what I had been searching for all my life, and I didn't even know that I had been, I knew something was missing from my life, but I didn't know how to find it. And I maybe I wasn't ready. I don't know. Maybe there's a timing. I sort of see that with people I know. It's like there's a time in a lot of our lives when the light switch goes on, and often it's at different times. I'm not out to try and convert or convince anyone of anything, because if you're not ready, you're not ready. And all the good intentions in the world, my focus now is to support and guide and share my story with anyone who's feeling the calling within themselves and maybe is looking to for some support with that. But yeah, that was number one gift.
Well, I get the impression that you have a history of reading a lot of self-help books, or perhaps other forms of what I would call our secular spirituality, books from writers like Wayne Dyer and the poet Mary Oliver, Oprah, and others. And I wonder, in many cases, people read these books looking for answers. But what I hear from you is this sense of questioning as you went along through life, looking for this sense of purpose. And I'm wondering if these teachings that you got from these books and these readings were in some ways a form of preparation for life's devastating experiences.
Yes, I believe so. I think we were looked after, and I know I was looked after every step of the way. Even prior to cancer, I would say once my marriage broke down, I think is when the journey really started, because although I went into deep grief and trauma and I got lost for quite a number of years, that had to happen, because that's why I call the book even Gifts from the Devastation, because some people find that a strange combination, but unfortunately for human beings, we often have to go through very, very difficult, traumatic experiences, to learn and to grow and to evolve as a result of that. So throughout my life, it was like a preparation. And even during the treatment in that period when I was switched off for 2 years, all I did was read and watch. Yes, if you want to call them secular, spiritual, all sorts of teachers, all sorts of spiritual and teachers around development and learning about life, and that became just my focus. So it did confirm nearly, or reconfirm for me nearly, what I knew already inside. I was just hearing it from other people, and I went, yeah, I know this. It was just reconfirmation. So yeah, it was a very important part of that aspect of development.
Yeah, I've heard Eckhart Tolle, another spiritual teacher, say that he doesn't have anything to teach people. Everything that they need is already in them. And I think that's a great perspective. I don't know if that's true, because I don't know that all people are that aware and as primed for life lessons and can learn from them. Because I see a lot of people who just have a lot of repetitive behaviors that are, that are not good or life affirming for them. I'm sensing that for you, since you were such a brilliant student at the university, that you had something in you that kind of guided you and informed your learning as you went along. And I wonder how might that breast cancer experience and the healing and the gifts, what do you say to people who are looking for some type of experience like that, or who are looking for what you went through? Because I think the world is looking for what you're giving, these gifts of
Mhm.
the devastation. And I'm wondering if there's a way that you can help people who are searching for that same thing you were searching for to find it.
Well, I suppose that's partly why I wrote the book. I mean, I started writing really as a way. I just give you an example of, when I talk about being guided, and once I let go, and once I knew I need, I am ready to go in a different direction. And I think that's an important part of this, the letting go. There has to be a desire within us for change on some level, because I can talk to everyone and anyone, but if they're still, and I know people like that, I know many people who are struggling, but they are still afraid and maybe unwilling to let go of life as they know it. They find it difficult to face into the uncertainty. Um, but what happened for me, once I let go, this is a very interesting thing. Once I knew I couldn't go back, something told me after cancer, there's no going back, that life is over. And
Mm-hmm.
I just said, okay, it was like jumping off a cliff, a leap of faith. And I just said, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready. Show me what's next. And I didn't know. And within a few weeks, I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in 20 years. And they told me about a friend who was doing a course called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. You may have heard of the book. It's sort of a spiritual
I
approach to
have.
creativity. Yeah. So I was, okay, I have nothing else to do and I don't know what to do. So I'm going to do that. So I started this beautiful course with this lady in her house by the sea. And a small group of us got together every week, sharing our hopes, our dreams, our worries, and just really getting in touch with ourselves. And out of that, I found myself talking about what I was learning from cancer. And after a few weeks, she said to me, why don't you write about it? You're talking so much about what you've learned. And this was the first step of me being shown the way. This person was sent to me. And I really believe that sometimes we don't have the key ourselves to the next stage of our life. Sometimes someone else has to unlock and open that for us. And I've experienced it so many times because I couldn't see that in myself. But when she said that to me, I went home, I sat down at my laptop and I started writing, and I stayed writing for 6 months. And the end result is the book. But I started writing it to process what happened. But I feel, going back to your question, that I don't know. I think it's a very personal and unique journey, and there's a different stage for each of us in our lives when we're ready. We may be struggling, but I was struggling for many years and I still wasn't ready. So I hope that in my book, when I wrote it in a very gentle, personal way, my book is in 3 parts. And the first part is all about a typical life of someone growing up in Ireland, facing the stresses, the strains, the speed that everybody does. And I hope people can relate to that. I then take them through the devastation of what it felt like. So I hope anyone going through any other devastation, the feelings are the same. And then I, at the third stage of the book, I talk about how you co-create and transform your life as a result of that. If this is something that is calling within you, and I developed a very practical tool because I trained as a life coach as well. So this tool is really about helping people focus in on the aspects of their lives, the inner aspects of their lives that they can influence, and how you do that and what are the steps. So my intention is that if someone reads the book, as you said, Eckhart Tolle said there, no one else, we all have the answers inside. All I hope my book prompts or triggers in someone is a journey of reflection for themselves, and that maybe my words will help them in that. But I don't claim to have the answers for anyone else. I think we all have our own answers, but maybe we need to be pointed in the direction of where they are, so
I
that we
want to
can
get to
find them.
that tool that you talked about, because breast cancer is the leading form of cancer among women in the world. I did some research and I found that Belgium has the highest rate of breast cancer of
Wow.
all nations. And Ireland is number 11. The US is number 22, and that is from the top 25 countries. And your family didn't have a history of cancer, yet you got breast cancer. So talk about the tool that you developed that can help people or help women who are going through breast cancer.
Okay. Well, this tool, I suppose, it's probably when you're coming out the other side. Everybody has, I suppose, every woman I have met has a different perception and view of what they want to do after cancer. Some people do want to go back to their old lives, and that's okay if that is working for you, but it wasn't for me. And I would say, what frustrated me sometimes with the medical system is when people used to ask about the connection with stress, and they'd say there's no connection. And that used to make me very angry, because that is not, and I know 100,000% why cancer showed up in my life. Nobody needs to tell me that.
Can I stop you there? Because when I read your book and I listened to you now, I was thinking she has a lot of stress going on, or she had a lot of stress going on prior to this diagnosis. And it had to have had, at least in my mind, my little mind, some impact on your body contracting cancer, since it wasn't in your family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before you go to the tool, can you just speak to that stress level, or how?
Sure. Like I suppose I was saying earlier, that sense of not having much purpose in my life. I feel I grew up, I was quite a sensitive child, and it just became, and I talked about my marriage breaking down, and my survival skills were just to stuff everything down, to suppress how I felt, to suppress the emotions, put a smile on my face and keep going. And at some point, I feel our systems can only carry so much. We are human, we're spirits in a human body, but the nervous system, everything, I felt it every day. I felt it. And it was getting more exaggerated as time went on, up until my diagnosis. So that's why I said I almost had relief. It made sense, because that stress is basically energy. It's like we're energetic beings, and emotions are just energy in motion. And if we stuff down emotions that are meant to be processed and moved through us, that to me is one of the leading causes of illness. And I have not met one woman or one person I have spoken to who has had cancer who will tell you that they were feeling wonderful, stress-free life. And I'm not saying everyone who is stressed is going to get cancer. We all are very different. I had prolonged stress in my life. And I heard a very interesting thing from a doctor. He's a Canadian doctor, Dr. Gabor Mate. And he would do a lot of work around the link between trauma and illness and suppressed trauma. And he's a wonderful man, but an amazing doctor. But he said it's often the people who appear quite happy and are always smiling are the people who often do get cancer, because they're suppressing everything. The people who express what is going on for them and maybe get angry, get upset, get whatever, talk about it, are often the ones that are very healthy. And it's been a common theme. So I would say that's a big message for me to anybody. If you're feeling these warning signs, and if you're feeling this stress, it is a sign. Life is giving you a sign. Something. Our bodies are messengers. How else does spirit, does God talk to us, but through our body, because we're in a body? How else can we, and we experience that through our intuition, through physical sensations, through how we feel, through our nervous system. This is all the mind, body, spirit connection. So yeah, I have I get very annoyed when I hear the medical system say that to people, because I've seen it and it leaves them so lost. And when they're experiencing difficult stress and someone is telling them there's no connection with their illness, that's not true. Definitely not true.
I want to stop and reintroduce you. You're listening to Celine O'Donovan, who is the author of Gifts from the Devastation, a book that she wrote in response to her experience with breast cancer. She's joining us today from Galway, Ireland. And I'm Kalani Kachela, the host of this program, Take on Faith. which is broadcast on KTAL-LP 101.5 in Las Cruces. Yeah, I believe that this is a time in world history where most people are stressed out. There's just so much going on around us with this pandemic, with inflation, with the war in Ukraine. It's just so much to keep people on edge. I heard a physician say a couple of days ago that no one is sleeping these days. And that in itself is causing more stress. So it is a time for us to try to get in contact with ourselves. But my sense is that we are, as you described, people who tend to just push stuff down, shove it down, don't deal with it. Maybe go to our addictions, go to habits that keep us feeling comforted versus dealing with the real thing before us that we need to pay attention to. And until someone comes up and shows up in our lives and says, hey, you need to do this, we often don't do it. So I wonder now, can we maybe return to the tool that you talked about earlier that you have around prevention and the treatment and the aftermath?
Okay, I wouldn't say it's a tool necessarily around cancer. I talk about it as I call it the inside out living indicator.
Okay.
And basically the conclusions and what I learned and have benefited from in my life is the coming to the understanding that I need to be living my life from the inside out. And you asked me what the number one gift was, and the number one gift was my connection with my creator, source, God. And that is from the inside, not from the outside. That doesn't come from the outside world. So as a result of that, I started then to look at, as I was feeling better and as I was creating a good new life, what is it? What am I doing? What are the things that are helping me do this? And I've summarized them. So basically, it's a tool from the coaching course, and it's basically like a wheel of life, and it's divided into 10 segments, and it covers everything from your boundaries, your values, your purpose, your beliefs, your emotional state, the level of sort of the state, your inner space and connection with your source. There's 10 categories, your self-care. And basically I get people to score themselves. So these are all the aspects of your life that you can influence. We cannot control the outside world. And you talked there about the pandemic, the war, all of these things. And yes, they are very stressful, but there is nothing most of us can do about that. So we have to find a way of being in the world. Like what I have found is a way of being most of the time in the world that is independent of what's happening externally. I can find that state within myself by connecting with my creator, my peace. And I have been doing that for the last 2 years. It has hugely helped me through the pandemic. I haven't felt stress, which I felt more stress before breast cancer than I have during the last 2 years. Something in me I just feel great peace in my life now. And I'm very optimistic. I know we have the light. I know the light wins over the darkness. That's all I can say. And I feel it very strongly. We have to see dark, but the tool is really designed to help people come back into that place. I call it sovereignty, and I think that's a big shift that's happening in the world right now. We have to stop giving our power away to external, whether it's systems or people. We have to come in, find our own connection with our own source. We all have that connection to our own power source, whatever, God, and from there, look at all the aspects of your life that you have influence over. So like I said, one example is boundaries. That's a very important thing that was something I had to learn a lot about. Who do you allow in your life? What types of people? What sort of energy are you allowing in your life? Is it uplifting you or is it bringing you down? Now we only have to look at just giving that as one example. If you look at the world now, it might sound crazy, but I don't watch the news and I don't watch TV anymore. I can get the news when I need it, but I'm not allowing this constant, diet of fear into my world, because and into my life, because I lived in fear before cancer. And it's hugely damaging in terms of stress, as we talked about, your immune system. All of these things are connected. And I'm not talking about saying that this isn't existing, but we have to find a way of, I think this is the challenge, this is life, how it's nearly mastering yourself. So that's the purpose of that tool. It has changed everything for me, and I lay it out in the book, and I give very specific examples. I ask questions. I give some suggestions around how do you cultivate this and live in a very empowered, sovereign way, because that's, I believe, the future humanity. We the power that we've given away, we need to take back and connect up to. It's like plugging out of the outside world and plugging into the inside world. Yeah. I see it as.
My sense is that having gone through this cancer, it just showed you that you can deal with the fears that the sources of the fear that you had prior to the cancer diagnosis. And with that, having survived it and come out on the other side the way you have, with such peace in itself, is the source of the peace. I heard another writer say that she had lost everything in a fire that destroyed her house. And after that, there was nothing that she really felt she could be afraid of, because she had dealt with the worst already. What do you say to that?
Exactly. That's, yeah. Oh, 1,000%. Because I can remember I said that to someone recently. And it's the truth. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of anyone. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of nothing. It's such a liberating way to live, because I faced what could be one of your worst fears, cancer. And when I did, I had no fear at all. I only found peace. So nothing. There is a great gift in that. There is a great gift, because until you face a devastation in your life, it's all very abstract and theoretical. But when you go through that, I call it like going into the fire, and you come out sort of cleansed as a result. But you have to go into the fire. It's no point listening to you what it would like to be in the fire. You have to go into it, and you have to find that within yourself, and you have to feel it. Like I feel it in every moment of every day of my life. And yes, sometimes I go a little bit off, and we all do. I get out of balance, but I come back, and I come back very quickly.
Mm-hmm. One thing I just realized is that your book is about your journey through breast cancer, but few men have breast cancer. Some men get breast cancer, but not many. And I wonder, what might you say to men in the audience who, they probably don't live with this fear of breast cancer. They may have a fear of some other forms of cancer, but what might be the equivalent for a man or a person, say, in the LGBTQ community, that is living with fear of some unknown factor, some unknown source that's equivalent to what you've gone through, and how might they prepare themselves or cope with it?
With any fear, is it? So, I mean, for men, it could be prostate cancer. That's quite a big one. And I hear a lot of men talk about it now. And it's quite a common. I met quite a few men in the cancer support center I was in. And if anything, in some ways, I wouldn't say it's easier for women, but women, I think, naturally are raised and educated to, and it's expected to talk and share more than men. So that was one thing I noticed with some of the men that I met. Those that were in the cancer support center, let's say, to talk and get support, were actually quite open and found it quite easy. So I imagine there can be, there may be many men who don't maybe have that outlet in their lives. So, I mean, one of the most important things is getting support, or talking to someone, even if it's privately going to a therapist, if you don't feel comfortable talking in a group. But the biggest, for me, particularly if you're living with fear, the number one thing is you obviously have, there's a disconnection inside somewhere, because once you're connected to your own, I suppose, truth and authenticity, and once you have that in life, I think fear, what would I say, starts to leave you. So, I know that's not an overnight, that just doesn't happens straight, I lived with fear because I gave a lot of my attention to the outer world, and that's and I would say to people, start if fear, and particularly fear of what's happening in the world, is really getting to you, you need to start shifting your focus and taking anything out of your life that is bringing you down, and sort of lowering your energy and increasing your fear levels. But also a big aspect, I think, why we are so afraid and why I was so afraid is because I didn't feel safe in my body. I didn't feel safe as myself. And that was because I had so much emotion suppressed. I think it's the number one cause of why, the root cause of illness always, and most fears, usually goes back to some emotional trauma or experience or something that we've suppressed in our lives. And
did you have a trauma, or did you have a trauma, or did you have something that happened to you that made you feel unsafe in your body that you can speak about?
I think just life. I think my marriage made me feel very, I lost a lot of trust in life, like the emotional pain from that. When I was a very young child, I think the thing when we talk about trauma is often people assume it has to be something huge, like a sexual abuse. And I'm not diminishing that. There's some horrendous things that happen to people. But the actual definition of trauma is any emotion that you feel that doesn't get fully processed in your body. So it doesn't get fully processed. You could be a young child and someone shouts at you and you're in shock and you don't feel that the pain of that, it gets stuffed down in your body. And then the next time that happens, more and more and more. So this starts to build. I had a difficult relationship that was very abusive. I was separated from my mother when I was born. I think that's a big trauma for a child.
That is a big one.
I was separated from my mother after I was born for about a few weeks. She had to go have surgery. When I was 2 years old, I had to have my tonsils and adenoids taken out, which was quite barbaric for a child that age. And my mother told me I screamed. I'd night terrors for about 2 weeks after that every night. So that's a big trauma for a child. And I'm sure that everybody has experienced trauma. So what happens is it builds in all of us. Then we start to become, it's often unconscious, but there's almost a fear of coming back in and sitting. I never could sit still with myself all of my life, because the minute I sat still, the pain of something would come up. And I found that too difficult. And I feared I would get lost in it and I'd never survive. So I kept running and the fear kept growing. And I would imagine most people are in that at some point, whether it's fear I'll lose my job, fear I'll get sick, fear the world is going to end. There's so much of that. And it's all being, and we also lost the outlet in many ways over the last few years to meet and support and talk to each other. So in a lot of ways, we do it online, but the actual physical interaction with other people, that was also taken from people. So I think there's huge trauma. So that's one thing I would definitely say to people. It is key. I wouldn't be where I am now only for letting go and getting help to heal. And I did that through cancer. I got a lot of support. That's a big part of it.
Well, we're down to our last few minutes. I'm wondering, for people who are living with fear or other stresses and traumas, can you tell us maybe a shortcut or a short-circuited way to get to that peace and overcome fear without having to go through a devastating event? What could you say to people in just a couple minutes on how to do that?
Yeah, that is the ideal, really, that we don't have to go through that pain. I suppose what I would say is really we have to start listening to ourselves. So whatever you're feeling in your life right now is telling you something. So your body, everything that you're feeling, these are the tools that we have. I call it our tools for truth. This is how spirit, God, life, the universe talks to us. So whatever is going on in your life has a message for you. And it's to start listening to that. So if there's a sense of you're feeling very stressed about, I mean, the one thing I always say to people is really to reach out and sit down and talk to someone. It is the most important thing to get support. The only way, and also I think just shifting your focus from the external world, getting help to release trauma, talking to someone, but also shifting your focus from your external world. And I talked about that sort of program or tool or that protocol nearly that I have that people can work with. That's all about saying it's taking your power back. What can I do in my life to help relieve the stress and fear? And there is a step-by-step process in the book to doing that. But it does take a certain amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to, there is no quick fix. I don't believe there's a shortcut to wisdom, as I heard someone say. If it was, we'd all be clicking our fingers. And I think there has to be a desire to change,
Right. Well, we're down to our last...
be a deep desire. We're
down to our last 40 seconds. And I want to ask you, how can people get in contact with you?
Okay, well, I have a website, CelineO'Donovan.com. I don't know if you can add that to the podcast or the notes, or if people are able to. Okay, I have a link tree also, which if I haven't sent, I could give to you, because my link tree basically has the links. My book is available in an audiobook format, which I narrated myself for people who prefer to listen than read. It's also available in a print and ebook. And then I have a mailing list for anyone who might like to connect with me and keep in touch. I would also say for anyone who's struggling right now, maybe dealing with cancer or another difficult challenge in their life, I am very happy if they want to reach out to me for support or someone to talk to or a listening ear. I'd be very happy to do that. And they can connect with me through, the link tree or my website. They can make contact with me.
Well, the book is called Gifts from the Devastation by my guest today, Celine O'Donovan. Celine, thank you for joining us on Take on Faith.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Take on Faith on KTAL-LP FM 101.5 in Las Cruces, New Mexico. If you have comments about today's program, please email me at xk@revdrxk.com. Be sure to get vaccinated, wear your mask, and stay safe out there. I'm your host, Kalani Kuchela.